Good afternoon and welcome to another Select stream. I'm Tess and I'm joined by my co-host and colleague Jig, and today we will be also joined by the lovely Mike Smith from Pillory Barn, who is talking us today about how to improve your website's user experience. So Mike, hello. Thank you for joining us. Be great if you could kind of give us a bit of a background about what you're going to be talking about today, what you do and who you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely intro. My name's Mike. So I'm the digital and creative director for an agency in Kent called Pillory Barn. We are a full service agency. So that means we cover everything from marketing communications through to creative design, brand development, website design and development, which is obviously what we'll be talking a bit about today, event management, social media management, the list goes on and on. We're broadly split into kind of two halves. That's why we managed to do such a vast range of different things. And today, I'm not going to be talking about all of that. I'm really going to be talking specifically around user experience and web accessibility. There wasn't a huge amount of detail in here, but hopefully it's enough information to give everyone a bit of an overview of what it is and how we can understand how to improve experience for the users of products, websites, platforms, pieces of software, and what steps we can take to implement those changes and make improvements. And then I'll also touch on ever so slightly towards the end on web accessibility, which is a slightly different thing, but also something that's very important and goes hand in hand with user experience as well.
Sounds great.
So without further ado, what is user experience? Well, it's not ketchup. That's just an example which I'll run you through in a minute. But user experience is defined as what you feel when you use a product or a website or a service or a platform, and it just covers how your experience is using it. So the example I've given here of a bad versus a good, it's the same brand, and we're all familiar with it, but the experience of using the old style tomato ketchup bottle is a lot worse than the user experience of using the new ketchup bottle, which through some clever product design and a bit of common sense, which is a regular thread through this presentation, you can actually improve the use of that product without actually changing its fundamental insides. So it's just a fun little example I like to show to demonstrate what's good and what's not.
Yeah, it's really annoying when you get to the end of the glass ones, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a bad UX test. Now, from something fun like ketchup to something that looks a little bit more complicated, there are several areas to UX, and one of the most important ones should I say, information architecture. And what that really is the culmination of three areas. So we have our users, so the people we're designing products and services for, the content, or it's another really word to describe it, is the content of that service or product, and then the context in which you're delivering it. So it's environment. And if you put those three things together, you end up with the architecture of your information. Now, what that really, if I dumb it down, it's really just how are you organizing it, structuring it and labeling it so that someone can understand what it is you're asking them to do, so that they can complete that task or that process, or they can find that little piece of information that they're looking for really, really easily and efficiently, and they haven't got to go hunting around for it. And if you fail at this, and a lot of people do, people are just going to give up, especially when using websites. Let's just say we're all quite impatient nowadays. We want everything now, and If you make it difficult for someone, they literally will just leave and go somewhere else, and they'll go to your competitor, or they'll go and find somewhere else online that gives them a better experience and they found what they were looking for. And
yeah, I've definitely had experiences of that, and it is so frustrating when you just want to be able to find a piece of information or a particular product as well. I find that one of the worst is you've seen a product. This has happened to me recently. I saw a product advertised on like Facebook ad or something. I didn't click on it at the time, but then I really wanted to go back to the website and find the item. And could I find it? It took me ages to find that specific item.
Yeah, so your experience was less than perfect, and you remember it, and that's the trouble, is you've remembered how difficult that was, so you're unlikely to want to go through the experience. And you know, you've gone with a less than positive view, and that's not what businesses and organizations want to achieve. They want all of their users of their sites and products to feel happy and have a great experience. And if you, and it's my very well drawn diagram, but it's if your journey from one step to the next, it doesn't have to be start to finish, it could be a small journey within a larger one. If that journey is complex and difficult and messy, it's just viewed as being hard, and it's not ideal, and people are going to get lost. So the way we can start to understand how we improve that, we have to understand the journey that they're going to go through. So any marketeers watching this will recognize these 5 steps. They are worded slightly differently, but they are generally the marketing funnel. It works the same way with a user journey, albeit slightly tweaked. And if you can understand the route that these people are going to go through on your site, or at least the route you want them to go through, you can guide them on it. So, making sure that we've grabbed their attention at the very beginning, whether that's an offer, whether that's a piece of video content, whether that's some beautiful imagery, or the fact that you've just got a very strong brand, you can then deliver your first important content to them. So this is the really high level stuff at the top of the hierarchy of your content. You can deliver that to them instantly to get them to navigate into further into your site. So you can take them into their reasoning and consideration stage, where they start to research more, reading, maybe they're browsing products, maybe they're reading the details of a product or a service, and then strategically placing opportunities for them to either buy something, sign up to something, pick up a phone and make a telephone call, whatever that call to action is that you want that person to do. You're taking them through a real logical order of things. And if you can understand that journey, it's so much easier to implement it. And when you're implementing those steps, you as a business owner or a marketing manager, you can't do all of those steps yourself. You need a team of people, whether that's your own in-house team doing it, or whether it's an external provider helping you do it. But you have to think about all of the elements that go into a user experience. Now, the first one I touched on, which was information architecture, is quite an important one, which is why I just delved a little bit into the detail of it. I'm not going to go into the detail of all of these because there's not enough time, but just to give a quick overview, we also have user research and understanding your audience. Who are they? You need to know who they are before you can structure your content. You need to have a content strategy. You need to know what it is you want to say, when you want to say it. There may be some strategic times of the year that you need to change your content. Yeah. We have to think about the visual design and the typography. How does it look? It has to be aesthetically pleasing and professional and well designed, but it also has to work. The functionality of it has to be squeaky clean. It can't be broken, because any kind of break in functionality will turn someone off because it doesn't do what they expect it to do. And then just linking back around in that nice flower diagram we've got here is the interaction design. So this is how a user interacts with those designed elements, so they feel like they're engaging with your brand or with your service or with your product. And
sorry, Mike, I was just going to say, I suppose it's quite an interesting thing that you just sort of touched upon earlier, that these things might change, so you might have to look at them on a regular basis. So it's not enough to just kind of do this process at the beginning of building your website. It's something that should be considered continuously, I suppose. Like, how often would you suggest re-looking at these areas?
It can wholly depend on the organisation and the business, really. You're right in thinking it's not a one-time thing. You do have to revisit these things because things change, and it's not necessarily just the organisation and the business that change what they do, which happens, but user behaviour changes, technology changes, the way in which we expect information to be delivered to us changes, and what is built 2 years ago may not be relevant again now. So you have to just audit it, and I'd say as long as you're looking at it, every 6 months to a year, just to have a look and make sure it's still doing the job it's supposed to be doing, then I think that's safe. But it'll be different for everybody. Some people might need to keep constantly looking at it. Others may be able to leave it longer and not have to change anything. But it is definitely something you should keep your eye on.
Okay.
So, like I said, I'm not going to go into the detail of all of these, but one I will just keep delving through is the information architecture. Now, if I had a bigger diagram, this would be circles inside circles inside circles. But information architecture has got a few, and I'm just going to go over some of the really important ones, which I think will help anybody who's looking to restructure or redesign or rebuild their website because it's not performing. The first one is organization, which I've kind of touched on already, but this is simply grouping your information into obvious sections so that a user knows exactly what it is they are looking at, and they can establish which piece of information is connected to what. So what I mean is it's not all over the place. You've got a bit there and a bit there and a bit there, and there's no real structure, and someone doesn't really know where they're supposed to go. The second one is hierarchy. Again, I think I've mentioned it once already, but this can apply to written content as much as it can apply to design and layout. And this is ordering your content into order of priority. What is the most important? What's the second most important? What's the tertiary importance? And that will help someone look at what you want them to look at. So if you make a big deal of the most important item, they're more likely to look at that first, which is what you want them to do because it's the most important. Everything else can come after if they so wish to read on. The third one is sequential order. Now, again, this is quite a simple concept. It's just structuring things in a step-by-step order. This could span several pages. It doesn't have to be all on one page, but as long as you're taking someone through the ordered steps they need to, their experience on that journey will be a good one because you haven't made them go forwards, up, back, down, along, back again, forwards, and they think they've lost where they are. So this is why you see things like, step-by-step questionnaires are in an order. Why making a booking for a table is done in an order, or why purchasing a product it's all done because you expect it to be done that way. And it's easier to then follow the process. Of course it is. And this may be, if you're trying to encourage someone to buy a pair of boots, you want to take them on the journey that lets them find the boots, it lets them read about them and discover them a bit more. You may want to give them a piece of information about somebody else who bought those boots, and then you give them an opportunity to buy them, and you're taking them through an order to ultimately get them to the goal that you want them to go to. A really obvious one, but one that is sometimes missed completely, is labeling, and this is just ensuring you label all areas of your content. So an example I always give is if you had a contact page, for example, on your website, you wouldn't just jumble all of that contact information all over the place. It would all be collated under one unified area that's called contact information or contact us, where you would then put your form, your address, your social links, your telephone number. It sounds obvious, and it is, but if you label your content correctly, people will find it. And it sounds like common sense, because it is. But if you don't label it properly, no one's going to find it. You know, and I won't throw any brands under the bus, but there is a media brand, quite a big one, who likes to hide contact information on their website without telling anybody where it is, because they don't actually care about your user experience. They just don't want you to phone them. But
I think there's quite a few like that, aren't there?
Yeah, quite a few companies like to hide phone numbers.
I feel like insurance companies are a bit like that as well.
Yeah,
they created like that.
Yeah, so if you know, and you have to do a lot of digging before you find what you want. So, you know, properly labeled content will really help your users find what it is they're looking for.
I guess it also helps them to trust as well when you're
Yes.
quite open and honest about all your information on your site.
Mm-hmm.
Shows a bit of honesty to it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, there's a transparency to it, isn't there? It's just to say, look, everything you want is here. You know, it's easy to find, it's easy to digest, read it, get in touch with us. We want you to call us, we want you to email us.
Yeah.
Then another one is navigation. So another simple one, but you know, your navigation on a website particularly defines how someone's going to navigate that site. You know, if your navigation is hard to follow, the whole site will be hard to follow. So you have to make sure that there aren't too many layers. You know, don't go more than 2 or 3 layers deep and make people really work for what they're looking for. Make sure that those navigation headers are all labeled correctly and obviously, so people can find their way through it. You know, it's how you would browse any piece of software. You know, even if we weren't talking about websites here and we were talking about a piece of software, everything should be labeled and organized and put in a place where it seems obvious, because that's where your brain's going to go, and you need to give the human brain what it wants. You know, if you have a page hidden somewhere and it's got some obscure name that doesn't match the content, then no one's going to find it. You know, so I've had experiences in the past before where, you know, we see web pages as, you know, a home, about us, our work, get in touch, as being these sort of boring old hat headers, but
that's what people like.
That's what people want. They're looking for it. So give them what they're looking for and they'll find what they want. You know, if you have a creative header that might sound absolutely amazing and look really unique and different,
but nobody has obvious what you're talking about.
No one knows what you're talking about most of the time, unless you have a specific niche audience. And then I think second to last one is association. So this one is around how you can help users find more content on your website in an efficient way. So you'll see this everywhere, that it may be down to a simple hyperlink within a piece of content that takes you to a piece of related content. So let's just say, I don't know, you run a shop selling dogs, for example. You may have a page talking about the dogs you have for sale, but in that content you may want to take them to the dog accessories that you also do. So you would make sure that you have some associated content that's either in its own area. That's why you see sidebars on a lot of websites, or you may see it as internal links within content to help you find associated content. And you know, as long as it's written well, you can really help someone navigate to those other areas without any effort. They haven't got to go back to the navigation to find your accessories. They can get it midway through their research, which is that's
good.
Really nice.
And I guess it helps with SEO as well, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
too,
it helps. If you can build in those keywords as well, that'll aid things from a search perspective. Which actually brings me on nicely, Tess, to the last one, which is search. That wasn't scripted. You know, we're all used to using search. You know, the amount of times we all say just Google it. A website itself of any sort of size, any sort of medium size to anything larger that has quite a lot of content on it, should have a search function, just to help people find specific information. You know, it works similar to Google. It's nowhere near as intelligent, but it will work on a keyword basis. So if you type in dog collars, it will find any page where the word dog collars is written and give you a list of all the pages so that you can go and find it. But it's just another way of helping people search for the information that they're looking for. that's the last one. I'm not going to go through 2 minutes. I think there's like another 8 more, but I won't bore everyone with them. But what I'm trying to get at here, and you've heard me say it a few times, is that people want to get from one step to the next step in the easiest possible way, and that is just a straight line. Don't make it complicated, just make it really, really simple. It's not lazy or anything like that. It's just easy, and people want it to be easy. They don't want it to be anything but. And if it is like my muddled diagram from earlier on, they're just going to get lost and leave. If you make this easy, then they'll stay. And it doesn't matter if there are several steps along this line, as long as it's sequential and they know where they're going. So that's a lot of information, I understand, but how do we apply all of that? So I said, you may have an in-house team that can do this, which is fantastic. You may need external help, which is something we do at Pillory Barn, obviously. And the way we used to do it is a bit like this image here. This isn't us, by the way, but it's very, very similar. It would involve a great big whiteboard or a giant boardroom table where we would map out lots of different user journeys using post-it notes and bits of paper and scribbles and notes and guides to try and map all the journeys, because there's usually more than one journey on a website. There's not just one, there's several. You map them all out so that you know exactly where the users need to come in and where they need to go, so that when it comes to the design and the development of that website, we can make really clever, informed decisions about what needs to go where. And then that negates the need of having to change it all after you've done it. There are a million web designers out there who can design a beautiful website. Of course there are, but there are less that can design a beautiful website that also does the job it's supposed to do and acts as a marketing tool for the business. It's got a job to do. This is an investment. People spend a lot of money on websites, and it's got a job to do. It's not just a vanity piece.
Well, actually, there's a quote that I read somewhere saying that you should think of your website as an employee to your business, because it's got a proper job to it. It is a marketing person for you, essentially.
It is, and sometimes it's the first port of call. It's the shop window, because a lot of people will search up a business, especially if they don't know who they are. They'll search them up first before talking to anyone. And if your website looks like a bit of a dog's dinner and hasn't been designed very nicely, or is a bit broken because it's been neglected for 5 years, or has a poor navigation or a poor experience, that's the first impression someone's going to have, and that's going to turn them off. You may be the loveliest business owner in the world and actually run a really good business, but your shop window was atrocious, and they're going to judge you on it. Obviously, they're not going to send you a message and tell you how terrible it was, but they'll probably just go somewhere else, and you'll never know about it. So,
I guess, how would you sort of measure your user experience?
So Google, this is where I need the help of my team. But
sorry,
that's okay, Tess. Google has will be. I think it's next month. To have a May or June, Google's going to start measuring user experience for the first time.
Really?
So if you have a poor user experience, and there are some elements, which is why I need the help from my team, because I can't remember the names of them, but I'm quite happy to share them with you once I've got them. But there's going to be three areas that they're going to measure, and if you do score low on them, it will start to affect rankings. So it's becoming really important to think about this stuff and not just brush it under the carpet. All the usual things that Google are measuring you on are still going to remain, but they're now thinking about how you experience that product. And it's come about because of web accessibility, I think, which I can touch on in a second. But they go hand in hand, and the web is an open place, and it needs to be accessible by everybody. So if the experience is not very good, it means that particular site has not thought about its audience and how they want to use the website. Okay. So Google will say, well, you're not thinking about your users. We're going to penalise you, just like we penalise you if your site's running really slow and hasn't been optimized.
How would Google know about your user experience? Is it based on like bounce rate, or how do they?
It's a really good question, Tess. And the three terms that elude me right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wonder whether it's using its robot to find whether it can find the pathways easily. If you're doing things like internal linking, or how bulky your navigation is.
It makes sense. Things like that.
I mean, it's probably using a bit of AI.
Oh, it will definitely be using their algorithms for sure. And like I said, it's only really a new thing. It's not measuring it at the moment. And when it does start measuring, it's not like everyone's going to suddenly get penalised. It'll take time to bed in. It'll be at least a year before it even starts showing any signs. Possibly longer. But before you get to that point where Google's reading the site, as long as you've thought about your user experience before you build the site and it's structured correctly, there shouldn't be a problem anyway, because your hierarchy will be correct, your content structure will be in a good order, your actual written content will have been thought about anyway, purely because if you're doing any SEO work, it will be written to be search optimized anyway. And as long as you've ticked all those boxes in the strategy phase, when it comes to a developer or a web designer building that site, they'll have all the information they need to build it correctly anyway. So there shouldn't be anything to worry about whatsoever. And I'm talking about sites that are really old and have been neglected, that are possibly going to fall foul of it. Any sites that have been built in the last few years will probably be just fine. But just harking back slightly to how you implement this. Like I said, we used to get around a table on a whiteboard and do all these post-it notes, but COVID made sure of us not doing that last year. We didn't do any of it. We did it all virtually. So we use a combination of Microsoft Teams, and we use Miro, which is an app for whiteboarding. I know there's Microsoft Whiteboard as well, and there's some other apps out there that do exactly the same thing, but it just lets you have a virtual environment to do the same thing. So we have virtual post-it notes and virtual links where we can drop in lots of things on a whiteboard, and everybody can contribute at the same time to the board. And we build it that way now. We build a complete digital whiteboard full of user journeys, which we can then share out. So it's actually quite a nice method, actually, because before you'd have to take photos and document it as you go.
Yeah.
Whereas
the benefits of COVID.
Now it's all recorded and we can share it all digitally afterwards. So it's actually quite nice. The only bad thing is you don't get to spend time with people, which can always help when you're thinking about user journeys, and especially as in those sessions, I always encourage people to invite people from outside the business into those sessions, because if you work in that organization, you'll have a certain view and a certain experience of it, whereas you do actually need to listen to someone from the outside, because it could be very different. You could be wrong. You may well be right, but you even have a user of that product or user of that service join in on that user experience session, because they'll have a really good view, and you can really get a lot of information from it. So just before I move on to just the last bits around accessibility, I thought it might just be an idea to throw up a few good examples. Like I said, I'm not throwing any brands under the bus, apart from maybe just one on the next slide, but they're big, they can take it. Some examples of good UX, we've got Compare the Market, which I think is a stand-up example of how you can take someone from A to B through a very seamless step-by-step sequential process. Buying insurance, pretty boring. We all have to do it, we don't want to do it, but actually their site is designed so well, in my opinion, that it makes it so easy. It's not a chore. And they manage to get you from saying what you want to actually purchasing insurance. Very, very simple. Gov.uk might be a shocking one for some people when they see that, but it's not held up as this beautiful design piece, but it looks the way it looks for a very good reason, which I'll touch on later. But Gov do a good way in simplifying the message and the content to suit the people that are reading it. They're very good at, I don't know if you've used any of their sort of beta services that seem to be in beta forever, but like if you're buying like car tax or something, they have a particular.
They are really straightforward, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Really, it's really
very simple, so stripped back for a very good reason. I just think it's okay. You know, it's government information. You know, that's essentially what it is, and government tasks and things you have to do to pay taxes and the like. But they do a good job in stripping back a lot of the unnecessary, and just giving you what you need. Yeah. PayPal is one. I think recently, over the last couple of years, they've been putting a lot of effort into how they the experience of making payments and sharing sharing money with friends, and
so easy,
and how they display that information in your dashboard, so it's easy to understand what you've paid and what you're about, what money in and money out. And it's you know, PayPal was already quite good at helping you buy products through other services, but recently they've done quite a lot of work in just using PayPal just to send money to friends. You know, for example,
it's brilliant. It's been a really good way in lockdown as well, of like, if you've like me gone on Facebook Marketplace and maybe bought something, instead of having to like exchange cash, you can just ping them some money on PayPal literally as you're picking something up, so the money's there.
The user experience of it is even better than it wasn't bad before, but it's even better now. You know, I went to the pub at the weekend, like I think the rest of the country did, and to get a round of drinks in, obviously we couldn't pay cash, so it's not like we could have a kitty of money where we all paid for our drinks. We set up a kitty on PayPal and paid on that.
That's cool.
Because nice, good user experience. We all transferred money into one pot and then paid the pub from the pot. So it was a seamless experience. And then the last one, Amazon, obviously we all know that one. You know, their pages, I would say, are quite full of information, a little bit chaotic in places. But the reason I put it under good UX is that, again, their process, their journey of getting you to do what you want to do, getting you to do what you want them to do, is very, very short. I think shortest than anybody. Yeah. Once you've found a product, you've only got to press one button and then it's delivered to your house. You know,
they have really killed off the whole payment process.
Yeah, you know, you may have to set up your payment details once at the very, very beginning, but
once that's done,
it's a bit dangerous. But literally, whatever you want, you press a button.
It is dangerous, not for them.
The journey doesn't get much shorter than that, other than we need to think it maybe, and then it arrives.
At some point they will do that. It will be a thought,
maybe,
and Amazon will turn up the next day.
You'll get a message saying, "You thought about buying that. Did you want it?"
Oh my God! Don't.
It'll be your speakers in you. Oh, we heard you wanted this. We bought it for you. You paid for
that one. That one. Yeah, we won't get into that debate, shall we, Jake?
That's scary. Oh no.
So like I said, I wasn't going to throw any brands under the bus, but the one that can take a little bit of criticism is Apple. Now, Apple are usually quite good at this. They usually get it right. But in my opinion, this is just mine. I
know what you're talking about.
They got it quite wrong when they released I can't remember which version of iOS this was, but the screen that you're presented with when you're on a call and you're receiving a call was an absolute disaster, because
it's really stressful, because you're like, I don't know which one to press.
You've got 7 buttons on a screen, which, okay, granted, could be okay, but two of the icons are the same. The decline and end and accept icons are the same, and they're all mixed together. So let's say you're colorblind, for example, or you struggle with you have what's the word for it, like if you have like a sensory overload disorder, like if you've got too much going on at once, being presented with that is like, I don't know what I'm supposed to press. What one does what? I haven't got a clue.
I wonder how many people hung up on the friends and family.
Accept. If I hit decline, does that do what? Does that keep my current call? Does that decline both of them? I really don't know. So that's a bit of bad UX from Apple there, who are usually actually quite good at it. And then the other one is not a brand in particular at all, but something I think we all have seen at some point, whether we've been in a car park or a shopping centre or anywhere. Ticket machines are notoriously rubbish at this as well. And it's usually the older generation that fall foul of it. The amount of times I've been to the hospital one and had to help someone use the machine is because they haven't thought about how someone's actually using it. You've got messages everywhere. Sometimes you've got a screen. The ticket slot looks like the card slot. The payment, the contactless payment thing is in a funny position, and it's not near where you've just paid, and you've got a screen to deal with as well. And the reason I hold this up is this is what happens in web design a lot of the time. People think we need to tell everybody everything, put it all on there. And they don't really think about where it goes or what order it's in or how to direct someone's eye to a specific place so that they know what they're looking at. They just chuck it all on and kind of hope for the best. And usually, obviously these ticket machines and things like that they get you to spend your money, but it's usually quite difficult because it's such a dog's dinner of content and layout. So I'm just conscious I'm probably a little bit behind here, but just the last few slides here, I've touched on it slightly, is around accessibility. So I talk about I've mentioned older generations a couple of times, and I mentioned sometimes if you've got visual impairments. Now, accessibility, which is a term I think we're going to hear more and more and more, is pretty much the standard for any web-based product or digital product. That if you design and build it, you have to consider a wider range of users, and that's taking into account any disabilities that those users might have. So just because you are blind, for example, does not mean that you should be excluded from being able to digest and take in the content of a site or use a service. You should be able to use it because you have as much right as anybody else. So when we're building websites now, and we've been doing it for about 2 years now, mainly for the public sector, which I can touch on in a minute. But when you build them, you have to build them now in such a way that the site can be navigated by keyboard only, or the site can be read to you via a screen reader, and that person understand where they are in that site. What's the call to action? What's the button? What does this form want me to fill in? So it can read it back to you in an order that makes sense. So any screen reader can just jump onto a site and read it to you, but does it know where to start? Does it know what the next section is? Does it know where the end point is? Probably not. And it will just give you this garbled message of information. Some navigation will run you through the entire navigation system before it lets you get to the first paragraph of text, for example. And if you're trying to navigate by a keyboard, that can take you quite a while just to get to
that would be really frustrating, wouldn't it?
So you're meant to be able to just whack the tab key and skip to content and skip the whole navigation. And there's lots of different things that you can do to make your website accessible to more people. So, things like design, and you might not think it, but a website, if it's been audited for accessibility, can fail on something as simple as that color contrast is a bit too low. Someone with color blindness won't be able to differentiate between the two colors. So therefore the contrast needs to be better.
Wow. What if they're your brand colors?
Well, the only thing it doesn't apply to is your logo. Your logo can stay as it is. That's fine. But if you've got using your brand colors throughout, and let's just say your brand is yellow and white. Let's just say that's what you chose.
Oh, yeah.
Yellow and white, or white and yellow, is going to fail accessibility. It's just going to fail.
Not going to look good, is it?
You'd have to make the yellow so dark to get it to pass the contrast test that you'd probably destroy your brand color anyway. But
But then you don't have to think about accessibility in that situation, in some of those situations.
Yeah.
Just design-wise, where they look almost
Well,
the same,
yes,
really,
yeah, you're right.
You're failing there anyway to the normal person.
Yeah. So the reason we put so much effort into it at the moment is, one, I think it's going to become even more important than it already is. And we started doing it because we do a lot of public sector work at the agency, and it's law that all public sector websites or digital products must be accessible to AA standard.
Okay.
And if they're not, they could be liable to be fined for it. So everything we do for public sector must be accessible. And just going to hold up a couple of examples here. When I say, obviously the one on the right isn't public sector, but it's a very good reason why. But the one on the left, which is when we helped the Kent Fire and Rescue Service, we helped them with a brand refresh last year. And as part of that process, we helped build a brand portal for them. But because the fire service is public funded, that brand portal had to be accessible. So everything we built on that portal meets that WCAG 2.1 AA standard.
Wow.
So, and there's just a whole range of things that we have to consider when we do the build now, the design and the build. Otherwise it will fail, and it can't fail because by law it's not allowed to. And then on the flip side, which is why got us thinking, why should it just be public sector? Just because it's public funded, why should we only do it on those sites? Well, I don't know. Maybe we should be doing it for everything. Every site should really be accessible, shouldn't it? So what we're doing now is we're building in those accessibility features into everything we do. It's taken a while to get that under our belt, but it's important. So like when we did the website for Strode Park down in Herne Bay, who do care for adults and children who've got physical disabilities and learning disabilities, one of the requirements was that it must be accessible, regardless of the fact that it's private charity. So we made sure that was accessible as well, and that passed its tests with flying colours, and is what it needs to be. So it's an area that I think if you're a business of size, and you can afford to make an investment into accessibility, it's worth exploring because it shows that you have a genuine care for the people that are using your product or your service. And you say, we really want to include everyone. You talk about people's EDI strategies around equality, diversity and inclusion. This is a step to show we really do care about it. We do want to include everybody, or at least as many people as we possibly can, and it sends a nice message, in my opinion.
What's the sort of cost of making your website? Can you do it sort of retrospectively as well?
It depends on the size of the site, Tess. It's if you've got a quite a small website, it probably won't cost a huge amount of money. But if you've got a very large site and it's content rich and there's a lot to, so say you've got multiple designed templates in your site, you've got loads of different functionality, you may even have some third party stuff going on that you can't quite control. It could be more complex. Hard to put a price on it, I'm afraid, but it's
I guess people can inquire with you if they want to.
Yeah, they can. And there's plenty of information online. If you were to type in web accessibility into Google and had a search, the Gov website has got a lot of information on it because they are accessible by default, which is why their site looks the way it looks, is because it's accessible. It meets the standard, such as like the NHS website is also accessible, which is why that looks the way it looks. So it's worth just doing a bit of research on it to see if it's something a company might want to invest in doing.
I guess accessibility and user experience go hand in hand in the sense of you want to make it as easy as possible. So investing in accessibility is only going to help your user experience. And if we're talking about Google and SEO looking at user experience from a business standpoint, that's going to help you in your rankings as well.
Yeah, I think it will. I think it will. And if I was to, I don't have a a closing statement as such, but if I was to leave a sentiment at the end of this, is that all you need to do to improve your user experience in the first instance is just to apply a bit of common sense and simplification to it, because if you just step back and look at it and in its simplest form, it becomes a lot easier. If you overcomplicate things and make things messy and difficult, it's never really going to work properly. You just have to make it super easy for that user, and it's a win-win.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mike.
That's
We're
all right.
just going to have a look. We've got a couple of questions. So how can you tell if a web designer has the right user experience knowledge? Because I think you said before that a lot of web designers can make a website look really pretty, but they might not necessarily be great at user experience. So
yeah, I would say ask the question. I think when you're selecting someone to design or build your website, maybe you've got a team doing it, maybe you've got 2 people doing it, maybe it's 1 person that can do it all. Is when you're talking to them and making your selection, is just to have a conversation with them and ask. Ask them if they've got an experience with building sites that are accessible. Ask them if they consider user experience methods when they're designing, and you'll soon find out whether or not they know what they're doing or they don't.
Okay, cool. And last one here. What should you do if your site is already built but you don't feel the user experience is very good or is good? So
there's probably a few options here, depending on when it was built and how it was built. Has it been built on a content management system that's already existing, and is it a modern one? And in which case you might be able to just make changes to it. So change the way your templates are structured. Or maybe build new templates to migrate your content onto them is one option. If it's been built on something that's a bit dated, maybe, and it's been neglected for an extended period of time, you'd probably be easier to start again and build it from the ground up, because the time that someone would probably have to invest in proving all of the out-of-date code and getting it onto a modern content management platform or a custom one, if that's what somebody wants to do, is probably the same as starting again. And you'd probably benefit more from starting again because you get to change so much more. You can really re-engineer it. But it depends how old the site is and the technology it's been built on. Okay.
Brilliant. I think that's it, unless anyone else has any questions. But just wait a couple of minutes. But thank you very much, Mike, for joining us today. And thank you to all of our lovely attendees. Thank you for coming. Thanks for watching. And if you want to see this again, we'll have a copy of this on our website, so you can have a look. Great. Thank you very much, Mike.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.